Hey everyone, it's Dave and Olive. Thanks for joining us here at Book Blather, where we talk about the books we've read recently to help spread the joy of reading. We do review a lot of science fiction, horror, and fantasy on this channel, but we try to be pretty well read, so we also talk about a lot of other types of fiction and nonfiction as well. Today we're talking about a doozy of a book, the latest release by LaRocca. Okay, thanks for joining us. Olive had a little medication today, so as you can see, she's extra super tired. But that's okay, because I'm going to need all my energy to talk about this book. Today we're discussing You've Lost a Lot of Blood by LaRocca. This just came out. This was published in March of 2022. And originally this video was not supposed to be this. We recently have been reading a couple of short, relatively new horror releases. So that's what this video was supposed to be. It was going to be, sort of a new horror release wrap-up. But we'll have to talk about the other stuff separately, because when we finished reading this book last night, I was like, no way. This is not. This book needs its own video. In part because it's just such a unique book with there's just a lot going on here, but also because no one is actually talking about what this book is actually about. So if you're not familiar with LaRocca, he's relatively new to the scene. I think the first book was Starving Ghosts in Every Thread, which was 2020. So he put out a few things in 2021. There was Fang Dandelion, which was some horror poetry, and This Strange Thing We Become, and Other Dark Tales, which was a collection of short stories. But LaRocca really exploded onto the scene last summer, in the summer of 2021, with a book you may have heard of called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. And this was kind of an unusual, controversial book. So we're not going to go into detail about that book today. That's a separate review, which I'll link later. But that book was unusual because that was set in the early 2000s. And that was when online social communication was really centered around chat rooms. So the story was about two women that meet in a chat room over the sale of an antique apple peeler and develop a very troublesome relationship. And LaRocca told that story. It was told in epistolary format, so that it was presented all in the form of the communications between these two women in their chat streams and their emails. And he used those mediums to tell this very disturbing story with a bit of metaphor and a religious symbolism. And so it was a little unusual, and it was pretty disturbing, and it caused a lot of controversy. People either seemed to love it or hate it, and it seemed to be split right down the middle. But it got a lot of buzz and attention for that reason, or in part for that reason anyway. And you actually can't get this book anymore. This is sold out and is out of print. And interestingly, there's actually a single copy of this book that is making the rounds around BookTube. A number of us, we read it and then signed it, sent it off to the next BookTuber, and it's still circulating around to this day. But though this one's out of print, Titan Books is publishing a new version in September, which is called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes. So it's this novella plus two new short stories. But anyway, LaRocca got a bit of buzz because of this. And his next book was supposed to be a book coming out this summer called We Could Never Leave This Place by, I don't know if I pronounce it right, Trepidatio Books, something like that. I maybe pronounce it wrong. But so that's supposed to be coming out this summer. And lo and behold, LaRocca kind of pulled a little bit of a Brandon Sanderson and announced, surprisingly, that he self-publishing this one, You've Lost a Lot of Blood, which came out in March. And so finishing this book yesterday was a strange experience. It's not what I usually happens to me when I finish a book. I closed the book, and the first thing I did was I just sat there for a long time thinking about it, and like flipping back to the beginning and like reviewing a couple things and trying to refresh my recollection, and just thinking about the book, and trying to like make sure I grasp like what fully grasp what I had read, and I probably sat there for like an hour doing this. And then the next thing I did, which I rarely do, was I then went online to see if other people had similar opinions with what I was thinking. And so on BookTube, there was essentially no videos of substantively discussing this book. So then what I never do, which is I went to Goodreads to look at what written reviews there were there, and there were some. So, but I didn't read them all, but all the ones that I read were all of the same style. They would be, they would say something to the effect of, I can't. This was a good book, but I can't say too much about it without spoiling it, or I don't want to say anything about this book because it's a book you really have to go into blind, But why that is, I don't. My suspicion is that probably some people really believe that they feel like you really need to go into it blind, and my guess is probably a lot of people are saying that because they actually finished it and have no idea what the hell they just read. Because for me, I had a little bit of that, right? So when I finished, I think I wrapped my head around a lot of it, but I understand now already that I'm gonna have to put this aside for a little bit and then go read it again in order to fully appreciate the full value of this book, because there is a lot to it. But for whatever reason, nobody was actually talking about what this book is actually about. So I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not going to spoil it. As I said, I know that I will have to go back and try to rereading it from the beginning to fully pull everything out of this book. And so I think, I kind of want to just talk just a little bit about what this book is about without spoiling anything. Number one, just to get you to read it. But number two, sort of to, maybe just impress upon you the importance of, really paying attention, like not approaching this book lazily, and knowing going in that there's a lot there. And so read it purposefully and really paying attention. And so hopefully, I can be a bit helpful, maybe giving you a little guidance to steer how you go into this book so that you can get the most out of it, derive the most value out of this book your first time through. So what is the book about, right? It's obviously at its core, first and foremost, it's a horror story. But in addition to that, it is what I would call a work of experimental fiction, but where the content also really matters, like a lot, But in terms of the format, it's kind of similar to Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, in that the format in which it's presented is kind of unusual, and is somewhat of the novelty of the book. Only this one, You've Lost a Lot of Blood, brings it to a whole nother level. So the basic format of the book is the underlying story is mostly about a main character called Martyr Black, and he has a partner, Ambrose. And so the book is, there's this book, right? And inside the book, it's bookmarked by by commentary by an editor who has put together this manuscript, which is trying to present to you who Martyr Black is. And that is done through a series of things, some of which are communications between Martyr Black and his partner Ambrose, and others which are different types of writing that Martyr Black did, because he was a writer, and mostly this novella, which you get in different pieces, but also other writings that he did, poetry and such. And so, because it's presented in these different mediums, with the communications and the writings of different styles, if you approach this book lazily, like we do for a lot of books that we're thinking are just going to be a fun book or a scary ride, and so if you approach it lazily like that, I think it would be easy to come away from it viewing the book as really kind of like a disjointed story, and it's absolutely not. It's a complex story that has a lot of different layers to it. So this is an embedded narrative, like I just explained. You kind of have a story within a story, but this is like the ultimate embedded narrative. Referring to it as an embedded narrative is like, if you ever seen that movie Inception, it's like characterizing that movie as people that go and live out a dream. It's a little more nuanced and complex than that. This is, like this is, think about those like Marushka dolls, where you have the wooden dolls, where you have like the one doll and you open it up and there's another smaller one inside, and you open that and there's another smaller one inside. This is like, that's what this is. It's like totally like nested stories where, won't give much away, but even just at the surface level, you can tell just from the title, right? This book is called You've Lost a Lot of Blood, and part of the story that's told in this book presents to you a fictional novella, which is called You've Lost a Lot of Blood, and the main character in that novella is a game designer who is writing a game called You've Lost a Lot of Blood. So that sort of nesting is like, happens throughout this book, and it's different types of, like you have like the story within the story and the game story within that story, but then each piece, like you have to look at, like, just take the game story, and then you have to look at that and what's going on there, and there's other types of layering, this manuscript is presented to you to try to show you who Martyr Black was, right? And part of that is done through voice recordings between Martyr Black and his partner Ambrose. But, there's another layer. And part of it is done through, presenting to you some of his writings. Except there's another layer to that. So that's this story is just like chock full of that. It's just all different types of layering, and it seems to, like, a central aspect of the story really seems to be, you have to kind of be like peeling back these layers to find out the truth, and to determine what really is reality. And there's just so many, like, layers on top of layers. It's just kind of, basically this manuscript is like an Escher painting in the form of a book. It's just it's pretty crazy. And there's so much more to this book too. There is just everything in this book has meaning. So you just really want to try to pay attention throughout this thing, and don't take anything for granted. Everything means something in this book. The other thing I wanted to mention was that this book, it was nice reading this book because it was a bit of a revelation for me in terms of the quality of LaRocca's writing. I hadn't read any of LaRocca's earlier books. The first one I read was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. But that was all dialogue. That story was told through the chats and the emails of the two women. So that's all you got. And in this book, I finally got a chance to see the type of prose that LaRocca is capable of. And LaRocca does the same thing in this book too. It has like all these different types of stories being told here. So he adjusts his writing style based on what exactly is going on. So, for example, the novella that is one of the embedded narratives within this story, that is very addictive and fast paced, and so it's the writing. That's how the writing is. It's very fast, curt writing. But there are other parts. Like I said, there's even poetry in this thing. But even the non-poetic parts, they're just LaRocca has just wrote some really beautiful prose. I mean, some of this is some really beautiful writing, and it was nice to see that. I didn't know that about LaRocca yet, and it was nice to see he was capable of this really beautiful prose. So, I guess we'll leave it at that. That was a lot, and I think it didn't spoil anything there, but hopefully that's helpful, and hopefully that will maybe help give you a little bit of a leg up compared to when I read it, and it maybe help steer you a little bit in terms of how you approach the book when you go into it, and maybe you'll be able to derive a little more of its value out on your first pass through. So yeah, needless to say, I highly recommend this book. Please go read this book. If you've already read it, or if you're gonna read it, please leave us comments below. I wanted to talk about the last book with people, but I really want to talk about this one with people, because this one is so complex. There's so much to this, and as I said, nobody has been talking about what this book is actually about. So I would really like to talk to people about it. I know that, like I said, I know I haven't fully wrapped my head around everything, so I know I'm going to learn additional things by talking to other people that have read it. So please go read this book and then let me know so we can talk about it. Yeah, reading this one was a pretty unique experience, and I'm really glad that we did. So we'll leave it at that. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell so that you get notified the next time Olive says it's okay to upload another video. We'll see you soon, but in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.